move like Michael Jackson is a whole other beast, and I was so self-conscious at first.
Lionsgate spent $200 million on a single movie, the most expensive biopic ever made. They handed the lead role to a 29-year-old with no acting credits, no hit album, and one viral cameo. His name is Jafar Jackson. He is Michael's nephew. The bet looked insane. Then Michael opened to $217 million worldwide, the biggest music biopic debut in history. Lionsgate's first $100 million opening in over a decade. So how did a kid once raided by child services for ordering a stun gun online become the face of a multi-billion-dollar franchise? And why was a Jackson the only person Hollywood could legally trust with this role? The answer is the most carefully engineered career launch the music business has seen in 20 years. When I first saw the $200 million line item on Lionsgate's 2026 release slate, I thought it was a typo. Then I looked at the casting, and then I understood what I was actually looking at. This is not a story about a nephew getting his break. This is a story about the legal architecture of the 2026 biopic era, a system in which studios no longer hire the best actor. They hire the actor who comes pre-cleared by the estate that owns the rights. Jafar Jackson is the cleanest case study of that system in modern Hollywood. To understand why, I had to start where the system started for him, long before any audition, inside a single house in Encino. Jafar Jeremiah Jackson was born on July 25th, 1996, inside the Havenhurst compound in Encino, California, the same compound where Michael perfected the moonwalk, the same kitchen where Katherine Jackson, the matriarch, stirred pots while 6 of the most famous men in music history rehearsed downstairs. His father was Jermaine Jackson, the Jackson 5 bass voice and Grammy nominee. His mother was Alejandra Genevieve Osayaza, Colombian-American, a designer whose work eventually surfaced on America's Next Top Model. Jafar grew up bilingual, biracial, and inside the most famous family in pop music. That sounds like a head start. It was also a problem. Jermaine had 3 marriages. Alejandra won custody after their 2004 divorce. That meant Jafar spent his childhood shuttling between wings of the same mansion. Same roof, different parents, different rules. He was homeschooled, not unusual for a Jackson. The paparazzi were not optional, neither was grief. When Michael died in June 2009, Jafar was 12 years old. The amusement park visits to Neverland stopped. The lawyers moved in. The family that had performed together for 40 years began to fracture in public. And then came the moment I want to focus on, because it is the early blueprint for everything that follows. In 2010, Jafar, then 13, ordered a stun gun online. He later said he was worried about the family's security after Michael's death. A cousin's prank with the device escalated. Child services were called. Police were called. The story leaked to TMZ within hours. Police cleared him. The headlines did not. I learned the world judges first and asks never, he later said. I keep coming back to that line because it is the first time in his life he encountered what would later define his career, the gap between what is true and what the public is allowed to believe. The Jackson family had been managing that gap for 40 years. At 13, Jafar got his first lesson. Years later, Lionsgate would hire him because of how well he had learned it. Before any of that though, Jafar wanted to be a professional golfer, not a singer, a golfer. He spent his early childhood on courses, not stages. The piano came later, almost by accident. He taught himself at age 12 by ear, working through Nat King Cole and Johnny Mathis records that played constantly in the Havenhurst living room. By 16, he was posting YouTube covers of Sam Cooke and Marvin Gaye. Voice steady, eyes older than they should have been. Industry insiders began to circle. He was managed early by Alex Avant, son of Clarence Avant, the late godfather of black music. That is not a typical Hollywood introduction. That is generational access. It matters who is around a young performer. Most aspiring singers spend their early teens trying to get a 30-second clip in front of a record executive. Jafar was eating dinner across from them. Quincy Jones was a family friend. Stevie Wonder was a family friend. The catalog of Motown, Epic, and Sony was, for the Jackson family, a series of phone calls, not a series of obstacles. That distinction is the entire reason Jafar's career did not need a viral moment to begin. It already had infrastructure. His first real industry industry exposure came in 2015 on Lifetime's The Jacksons, Next Generation, a reality series tracking him alongside cousins Taj, Terrell, and TJ. The show lasted 1 season. It was, by every reasonable metric, a commercial failure, but what looked like a failure was actually the system doing its quietest work. The show put Jafar's face into a few million American living rooms. It captured him on a stage. It created footage. When Lionsgate would later run the largest casting search in a decade, that footage existed. That is the part of show business no one explains. The failures still build the asset. By 2018, he was performing solo originals at the Dolby Theater. By 2019, he released his debut single, Got Me Singing, a track that quietly accumulated nearly 10 million YouTube views over the next several years. It was not a hit. It was a proof of concept. He could sing, he could move, he could be packaged. And by the time Lionsgate started looking, that proof of concept was about to become the most legally important casting decision in modern Hollywood. I want to walk you through the money because this is where the legal architecture argument stops being theoretical and starts being a spreadsheet. In 2021, producer Graham King and Lionsgate greenlit the project with a starting budget of roughly $140 million. That number would climb. Music rights alone cost tens of millions. Concert recreations, the Thriller set, the Bad Tour staging, the Motown 25 sequence burned through cash like a small Marvel movie. By the time the cameras rolled, the budget had reached $155 million. By the time of release, the final price tag was reported near $200 million. That is the most expensive biographical film ever made. Bohemian Rhapsody was made for roughly $52 million and grossed $910 million. Elvis cost $85 million. Straight Outta Compton cost $28 million. Lionsgate was spending more than triple any biopic comparable in the modern era. And once you spend $200 million, you cannot afford a casting controversy. The estate, which controls every Michael Jackson song, image, and likeness, had approval rights. An outside actor risked legal friction, family pushback, and the biggest commercial liability of all, the estate refusing music rights mid-production. That is not a small risk. That is a $200 million write-down risk. So the solution was not Hollywood. The solution was family. A casting director cannot get sued by the estate if the estate's blood is on the call sheet. That is the unspoken business logic that put Jafar in the role. His resemblance was a bonus. His last name was the asset. Director Antoine Fuqua officially cast him in early 2023 after a 2-year global search. Katherine Jackson, 95 years old and the family's gatekeeper, publicly endorsed him. "He embodies my son," she said. That single quote is worth millions in marketing equity. It bought the production immunity from the harshest critics, the family itself. Once cast, Jafar disappeared. For 18 months, he trained with vocal coaches to lower his natural baritone into Michael's falsetto register. Movement coaches retaught him the moonwalk frame by frame from the 1983 Motown 25 footage. He lost weight. He grew his hair. By the time leaked set photos hit Twitter in late 2024, the response online was uniform. The resemblance was eerie. The trailer dropped in late 2025. It racked up 230 million views in 24 hours. The most watched music biopic trailer in history, beating Bohemian Rhapsody and Elvis. That number alone changed the conversation. The bet was starting to look smart. Then April 2026 happened and the numbers stopped being projections. Domestic opening, $97.2 million. Foreign opening, $121.6 million. Global total in 3 days, $218.8 million. That is the largest opening weekend ever for any biographical film, beating Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer at $80 million without adjusting for inflation. It is also the largest opening weekend for Lionsgate since 2015's Hunger Games. Mockingjay Part 2. Lionsgate had endured 7 straight box office flops before Michael. The biopic did not just save the studio's quarter, it saved its narrative. Universal, which is handling international distribution outside of Japan, has been publicly briefing that they expect the film to clear $2 billion worldwide. The Chinese market alone, where Michael Jackson is the most statued foreign celebrity in the country's history, is projected to deliver hundreds of millions. $2 billion would place Michael among the top 15 highest grossing films of all time. It would outperform every Marvel solo film except Black Panther, and it would do this with a 29-year-old first-time lead whose previous biggest credit was a canceled reality show. The math, on paper, should not work, but the math is not really about Jafar's performance. The math math is about access. The estate is the moat. Jafar is the keyhole. In international markets, the IMAX numbers tell the same story. The film's opening weekend pulled $24.4 million from IMAX screens alone, the biggest IMAX debut ever for a musical biopic. That premium format revenue is where the real margins live. IMAX tickets cost roughly double a standard ticket, and the studio's share of the gross is higher. For a film with a $200 million budget, the IMAX cut is the difference between a hit and a franchise. For Jafar personally, the windfall structure is what I find most revealing. He reportedly took a modest base fee. Industry estimates place it in the low seven figures for a first-time lead, but the upside was structured in points. Multiple trade publications have indicated his contract includes box office bonuses tied to global gross thresholds. Layered on top, a soundtrack album credit with at least 3 lead vocal performances. Modeling deals signed in 2024 with luxury brands. A debut album reportedly in production with producer Rick Rubin attached. Touring opportunities post-release, and, most importantly, a long-term option for the second Michael film Lionsgate is already preparing. His current public net worth is reported around $5 million, but that figure is already obsolete. Within 12 months of release, conservative projections place him in the $30 to $50 million range, depending on back-end triggers and sequel commitments. All of that, though, is downstream of the one thing that actually made this possible. The thing that no audition could substitute for. The thing every other Hollywood studio has tried and failed to obtain for 15 years. Hollywood has been trying to make a Michael Jackson biopic since shortly after his death. Every previous attempt collapsed. The reason was almost never creative. The reason was almost always rights. The estate controls the music. The estate controls the likeness. The estate controls the recreated concert footage. Any production that loses estate cooperation loses the movie. Lionsgate's edge. The entire reason the film exists is that they did not just license the estate, they built the film with the estate. Casting Jafar made that partnership permanent. You cannot fall out with the family if a family member is the star. His face on the poster is, in business terms, a lock on the IP. That is the edge, not his voice, not his moonwalk. The contractual stability of family blood standing between the studio and a $200 million write-down. I want to be direct about what that means for how Hollywood actually works in 2026. Disney built $1 billion machine on Marvel because they owned the IP and the actors were replaceable. Lionsgate cannot replace Jafar. The estate will not approve a replacement. That asymmetry shifts the power. In a normal Hollywood deal, the studio holds all the leverage and the actor takes scale points. In this deal, Jafar's leverage compounds with every successful sequel because his replaceability falls towards zero. That is not a career path. That is closer to equity ownership in a franchise. The album play extends the same logic. The Michael soundtrack is reportedly being structured as a hybrid release. Original Michael Jackson, masters license from the estate, alongside Jafar's own re-recorded covers of select tracks. Industry analysts have suggested the album could comfortably clear platinum certification on the strength of the film's audience alone. If that happens, Jafar quietly becomes the only living artist with a top 10 album built directly on his uncle's catalog, without ever needing to compete in the open music market. The lifestyle around him reads as confirmation, not coincidence. He has been positioned in Calabasas, Malibu, and Encino properties tied to him in industry reporting at a combined valuation north of $26 million. A Rolls-Royce Cullinan at $400,000, a Bentley Bentayga at $200,000, a Mercedes-Benz G-Class at $150,000, a combined car collection over $1 million. None of this is vanity, it is stage setting. Hollywood capitalizes new stars the same way private equity capitalizes new portfolio companies. Visibility, status markers, and a calibrated drip of personal narrative. Every photograph of Jafar in front of a luxury vehicle is a signal to advertisers, sponsors, and the next round of producers. This asset is performing. The personal life rollout follows the same playbook. His 2025 engagement to artist Maddie Simpson, sealed with a Malibu beach proposal, was rolled out the same week early Michael test screening reports began circulating. That is not coincidence. That is a controlled release of human interest content that warms the audience to the lead before the movie arrives. Jafar has also leaned into charitable footprints, a Grammy Foundation donation, a Colombian American scholarship reportedly funding 5 artists at $10,000 each, mentorship in LA youth programs. He won the BET Humanitarian Award in 2025. Months before the movie's release. The reward was real. The timing was strategic. I want to step back for a second and name what we are looking at. Most actors build their leverage. Jafar inherited his. His leverage is structural. As long as Lionsgate makes Michael films, and they have publicly stated they will greenlight at least one more, Jafar holds the only face the estate will approve at scale. That is not a career, that is a franchise position. His uncle built an empire of records. Jafar is building something different, an empire of rights cooperation, and that is the most valuable position in modern Hollywood. But every empire has a perimeter, and the perimeter of Jafar's empire is where this story turns. Mid-production, Lionsgate discovered a clause in Michael Jackson's 1993 legal settlement that legally barred any film or television depiction of the accuser involved. The biopic's entire third act, already shot, had to be scrapped. Tens of millions in additional spending. Antoine Fuqua rewrote the ending around the relationship between Michael and his father, Joe Jackson. Critics noticed. The film's Rotten Tomatoes score sits at 40%. Reviewers have called it a sanitized portrait. The estate's cooperation that built the film also softened it. That is the trade Jafar inherited. The nepotism backlash followed the same logic. Online commentary throughout 2025 questioned whether an outsider could have brought more dramatic range to the role. Jafar's response, delivered on an Instagram Live in 2025, was direct. I earned every step. The phrase itself acknowledged the accusation it was answering, but the criticism is not just about him. It is about a pattern I have been tracking for 5 years. Biopics about deceased music icons are increasingly being made in partnership with the estates that control the rights. Elvis was made with the cooperation of Priscilla Presley. Bohemian Rhapsody was made with the surviving members of Queen. The Bob Marley film was produced by his family. The result is the same in every case. Critical scores in the 40 to 60% range, sanitized portraits, and box office numbers that make studios rich. The audience has voted with its wallet. They want comfort, not investigation. Jafar's Michael is the most extreme version of that bargain, which brings me back to the stun gun in 2010. That 13-year-old learned in public that the gap between truth and narrative is something you either control or get crushed by. The Jackson estate, the studio, and Jafar himself have spent the last 3 years controlling that gap with surgical precision. The result is the biggest biopic opening in history and the most carefully managed lead actor in Hollywood, and that is the paradox he now lives inside. The same family name that opened the door also locks the door behind him. He is the most visible new performer of 2026, but only inside one franchise, inside one estate, inside one story he did not write. If Michael's sequels succeed, he is set for life. If the franchise stalls, he is a 30-year-old actor with one role on his resume and a last name that overshadows any other character he tries to play. His debut album, his potential other films, his post-biopic identity, all of it will be measured against the uncle he just spent 2 years pretending to be. Lionsgate placed a $200 million bet. The opening weekend says they won, but the longer wager is on the man in the fedora and on whether the legal architecture that made him a star will eventually become the cage that contains him. The next chapter of the Jackson business empire depends on his answer.